I would hate to have to follow that, and turns out I have to. So, I'd like to discuss something that impacts our daily lives, whether or not we stop to consider it. Computers and their components, as presented by me, Adam Schrock. Beware, there are a lot of acronyms that I'll be using, like CPU, GPU, SSD, HDD, RAM, but I'll explain what they are as we go through it. So what is a computer? Well, according to Wikipedia, it's a general-purpose device that can be programmed to carry out a finite set of arithmetic or logical operations. Well, that's good, but what does that mean? Essentially, it follows a set of rules established by programs to take an input or command and give a corresponding output or answer. Computers are in everything. Obviously not really. In fact, I doubt anyone here has a computer in their sock. If you do, you A, have too much money, B, a wicked imagination, and C, probably lower back problems. So, computers contain computers. Yeah, really. Cell phones, calculators, airplanes, children's toys, greeting cards. You know those obnoxious singing ones? One of those has more computing power than the entire world in the 1950s. Our government would have killed to have one of those. No, literally, they would have killed. It's the CPU, or the central processing unit, is the brain of the computer. It's responsible for all the logical processes. It's like the frontal lobe of the human brain, which does precisely that. At their outset, they were composed of an array of printed circuit boards, those little green things with all the little wires and nodes on them, but have since been condensed into microprocessors. So here's a printed circuit board. Now imagine like 50 or 100 of those being able to perform a simple calculation like 2 times 6. Now we have this. That's a human index finger, or a pinky, I'm not sure, but either way it's small. If you're not impressed by that, you probably wear a top hat and use a typewriter. So the central processing unit is divided into two primary components: the arithmetic logic unit, which does all the work, and the control unit, the lazy manager that just tells it what to do. So together, they fetch an instruction, they decode it into their own little binary language, execute it, and write back. That is to say, they just indicate that it's been completed. They did what they wanted to do. The central processing unit also is, modern ones are composed of over 1 billion transistors, which are just a bunch of little switches that can hold two values, on or off, or 1 or 0 in the case of binary. And these change with a pulsating current of electricity. And the rate at which that pulse occurs is called the clock rate. This can be increased to increase the speed of the CPU in a process called overclocking, but that brings with it increased temperatures, which, if not accounted for, will cause this. Okay, your computer probably won't catch fire unless it's made of kerosene, but it will melt your CPU and set you back like $500. Probably not ideal. So you need this. A little fan, or you can do it with water. You just pour a glass of water on your computer, it cools it off. Now, you actually have a small metal box that's made of like nickel or something that'll absorb that heat, send it into the water, and that water will go off to a radiator where it's cooled. Memory. It's the second most important aspect of any computer. You could have the most powerful processor in the world, but if it doesn't know what to do, it's kind of pointless. You need somewhere to store programs. Well, the smallest form, the CPU cache, is only a few megabytes, which is nothing compared to the gigabytes of storage our hard drives have. So, the CPU cache just contains copies of information from other forms of memory, either from the RAM or the hard drive. And essentially, that's what tells the CPU what to do. The larger that is, the faster the CPU. Memory. Random access memory. That is not truly random anymore, as it once was. Rather, it reads in quick bursts, which is still preferable to the linear access methods of a hard drive, which requires it to go through several directories. But it's still not as fast as the CPU cache. So think of it this way. The cache is your personal book collection. Your RAM is your local library, and your hard drive is like the Library of Congress in terms of access speed. Which one do you prefer? So RAM performance is dictated by two key factors: frequency, which is how often the data is taken from it, and latency, how long it takes that data to get from point A to point B. You can't have both for some reason. Apparently, computer engineers just can't make those work together. So, here's a picture of RAM. Lastly, you have the storage drive. This is where programs and other information is stored indefinitely, because unlike the other two, it's not wiped every time you turn off your computer. Thank God, otherwise we'd still have to use those floppy disks with just a few commands on them. I don't think any of the kids here know what those are. My dad does, that's for sure. So unlike the other two types of memory, yeah, these are not erased. Yeah, I just talked about that. So they come in two primary types. Hard disk drives, which are slower, often noisy, because they rely on a spinning metal disk. That's real advanced technology there. And they have a longer life expectancy, and they cost less per gigabyte of storage than, say, a solid slate drive, which is faster because it uses lasers, but they have a limited number of writes, and they cost a lot more. Here's some photos. You can see there the spinning metal disk of the hard disk drive. Then you may have an accelerated processing unit, or APU, which just helps the CPU out in various processes. For my purposes, I'll be talking about the graphics processing unit, or GPU. These are often contained in CPUs, and they help display what the computer is presently doing. I don't think anyone can use a computer without a monitor. It's pretty difficult to do. So discrete GPUs, which are separate from the CPU and are considerably more powerful, are become important in 3D rendering. The ultimate objective is to achieve greater detail and higher frame rate, which is how often the image is refreshed. And they can also be used to emulate or accelerate CPU processes in some cases, like in this monster, which has 25 GPUs and can crack passwords in seconds. GPUs. They function much like a CPU, but they are optimized for graphical processes. Their performance is dictated by 4 primary attributes. Their clock speed, which is how fast they process, their video RAM, which is how much information they can store, so how much you can put in one frame, and their memory clock and memory interface, which together are like a highway with a bunch of cars. Memory clock is how fast those cars are going, and the memory interface is how wide that highway is. Naturally, you want both. This is an image of a discrete GPU. Fancy. Has its own little heatsink on it. Is this pretty? Does anyone think this is pretty? You're wrong. This is pretty. This is much better. This is enabled by an increased vertex budget and superior shaders. Well, the vertex budget is essentially how many vertices you can have to create your model, demonstrated here. Notice how the image on the far right is able to better emulate, hit the button, better emulate the contours of a human face, whereas a paper face over there on the left looks kind of like the Thing from the Fantastic Four. So unless that's what you're going for, you want more. And shaders essentially just color in those little triangles. Then there's the motherboard. It is basically just a bunch of connectors for your other components. There's a lot more to it than that, but you'll see why I can't explain that. A motherboard's primary attribute is its bandwidth, which is how fast it can transport that information from the various components. It often includes an integrated sound card, which just provides audio output for your headphones, speakers, etc. I won't go into depth, because look how many aspects there are to a motherboard. That is beyond me. You can build your own. In step 1, I would recommend you visit pcpartpicker.com and mix and match your components. It has a compatibility filter, so you can't mess it up too badly. You can purchase your components, build it. I'm not going to tell you how, because there are tutorials online, or you can have someone at your local computer store do it. And then you can dance in the money you save by not buying a Mac. Preferably, it would look like this. Not like this. This will most likely burn your house down, and it looks more like a bomb than a computer. Thank you.